Week 1 of the NFL preseason is officially in the books, and fantasy analysts everywhere have taken to Twitter to run victory laps on players they've touted all offseason after Week 1. I thought maybe we could hand out some awards to those who overreacted the most, but then Antonio Brown walked into the room and said, "Here, hold my helmet." Headliner Nation, what's going on? Welcome back to the Draft.com studios. Kyle coming to you with another episode of the Fantasy Headliners. Already called it Overreaction Monday. We've got a lot to talk about from training camp and from the preseason. We got to roll through this information, but before we get started, don't forget, only $19.99. Get your Fantasy Headliners draft guide at thefantasyheadliners.com. If you order one before August 15th, we're going to put you into a drawing. You're going to have a shot to win a signed Alvin Kamara jersey. Almost 500 pages of fantasy football bliss. Get yours now at thefantasyheadliners.com. But let's jump into it. And the very first thing, I already alluded to it in the opening, AB. WTF. Man, what is going on with Antonio Brown? I have to say at this point, let somebody else draft him. Honestly, if you're in a redraft league and you have not drafted yet, don't even worry about it. Honestly, do I think he's going to hold out the entire season? I really don't. I think that this might be just some sort of big ploy for Hard Knocks. Yes, he's talked about, not even returning to the game and things like that. And he says he's upset about his helmet, but I don't know. I can't see him not coming back. I can't see him retiring. We'll see what happens. But again, that's why the whole situation is so confusing. But as a fantasy owner, do you really want to invest in that? We've seen what he's done in Pittsburgh. Now he's freaking out in Oakland. What's going to happen? I don't know, but I don't want him on my fantasy team. So skip on him unless his ADP plummets to the point where you can say, you know what? Basically like we did with Tyreek Hill weeks ago when we thought he might be suspended. His value got to a point where we said, you know what? If we're without him, that's okay. But if he were to play, this is a great pick right now. Same thing with Antonio Brown. Is he going to play? We don't know. But if he were to drop to several rounds after his ADP, maybe take a chance on him. But again, he's going to have to plummet a lot. I mean, personally, I'm probably not going to take him unless he were to fall into the 6th or 7th round maybe. And that probably won't happen anytime soon. People are going to continue to take them, but don't be that person. Let someone else draft Antonio Brown. Get completely off that bandwagon for right now. Let's see what happens for the time being. But it's hard to take a guy like that who is a head case basically all the time. So stay away. Antonio Callaway from the Cleveland Browns. He's been suspended for 4 games. One thing I want you to keep an eye on is Rashad Higgins. He's a guy, there's a lot of Higgins truthers out there. He's a guy that has looked good in limited action before. Antonio Callaway was going to be a guy that was going to be more of the number 3 option, a deep threat. So does the suspension do a whole lot for other guys around him? Probably not. He was going to get a few big plays here and there. 4 games out, though, Rashad Higgins is going to have a chance to jump in. If you play in a really, really deep league, maybe you play in like a 14, 16, 20-team type league. If you do at that point, then maybe we're taking a look at Rashad Higgins as a really deep stash later in drafts. Jameis Winston and the Bucs got off to a really impressive start. That offense really looked in sync from the get-go. And Jameis Winston looked really, really comfortable. For a guy who has just never seemed to look comfortable at the NFL level, he looked comfortable in this offense. Again, Overreaction Monday. Don't want to go too far with it, but it's encouraging to see. We've been telling you all offseason long that Jameis Winston is a guy in this offense that you could draft super late, and you could get possibly some QB1 numbers out of him. Will that happen? Still remain to be seen. We need to see some more action from him, but so far, so good. And Chris Godwin truthers, if you're out there, which I know you are, also off to an excellent start as well. Both of them looked good. That offense looked good. Let's see if they can keep up that momentum. Daniel Jones, man, he looked excellent. Again, let's take all this with a grain of salt, but he looked really good in his first start. The problem is I just don't see the Giants benching Eli Manning anytime soon. If you play in a super flex or a 2 QB league and you want to invest in the quarterback situation there in New York, you need to draft Eli Manning and Daniel Jones both. But I will say this, Daniel Jones made some excellent throws. He really thread the needle on a couple of different passes, put that ball into some really tight windows, and his wide receivers made some really good catches. Off to a good start. In 1 QB leagues, we're not taking either of those guys. In 2 QB or super flex leagues, maybe, but you'd have to take both of them just in case there is a change at some point in the season. Raiders guard Gabe Jackson is going to be out for the next 6 weeks. And the reason that this is significant for me, number one, they're already missing Richie Incognito for the first 4 games of the season. And then Gabe Jackson could be out up to 6 weeks or longer. So right now that time frame is right around that 6-week mark. But that's a huge issue for Josh Jacobs. If you watch this channel quite often, you already know that Jake and I are not very high on Josh Jacobs. Yes, the situation is beneficial for him, but there are far too many red flags and far too many risks for me to invest in him as my running back too, even though the situation looks really, really good. I just can't do it. The one thing about Josh Jacobs is, yes, there are some potential for really big weeks. I get that. That makes him more of a best ball pick for me. However, he's going to be super inconsistent, especially if this offensive line is going to be down at least 2 starters for the first couple of weeks and then 1 starter for several weeks after that to begin the season. It's just not looking good there, especially with Antonio Brown. We've already talked about him. What's going to happen with him? If he doesn't show up, then basically your wide receiver 1 is Tyrell Williams. Is he going to be able to get the job done? It just, there's too much going on there that I just can't find myself investing in it. If you don't have Antonio Brown, are they going to stack the box a lot against Josh Jacobs? It's just not a great situation. Josh Jacobs, I'm still off the bandwagon on him. He would have to fall tremendously. Right now, he's a guy that you got to get in about the 4th round. You have to take him as your running back too. I don't want him as my running back too. There's too much that could happen there. Raiders Nation, I'm not saying I don't like Josh Jacobs. If he had a better offensive line and they had those weapons there, if Antonio Brown was fully healthy, maybe I think about it, but I can't do it right now. Again, we're skipping on Josh Jackson right now, Josh Jackson. We're going to talk about Justin Jackson in a few minutes. We're talking about Josh Jacobs. We're going to skip on Josh Jacobs for the time being. Going on to the next running back competition that we've got going on, you've got Kenyon Drake, Kalen Ballage right now. Those two are fighting for that RB1 position with the Miami Dolphins. And Kenyon Drake got the start this week. Ballage is the one that looked better. It wasn't by a whole lot, though. If it hadn't been for the touchdown that he scored, he really wouldn't have outdone Kenyon Drake by that much. Kenyon Drake, 3.3 yards per carry, I believe. Ballage was like 3.8. So neither of them could even get over 4 yards per carry. That situation will get better. I'm not going to read too much into that. But this is really looking like it could turn into a 50-50 split. So keep an eye on that. Kenyon Drake, I still believe that he offers a ton of value this year. Finishes the running back 15 in PPR leagues last year. I don't see how he can't do that again, at least in 2019. So he's a guy that I'm still going to continue to invest in because I think as we get through the offseason, he'll end up being just fine and he'll still have a good regular season. N'Keal Harry, he shook off a lot of doubters in week 1. He made some really excellent catches. A lot of people had concerns because in training camp, he's had a lot of drops. He seemed to put some of those doubters to rest with a good week 1 performance. However, we need to see more from him. He has to continue to develop every single week. If he's in training camp and he's still having a lot of drops after another, that's great that he's going to come out and perform in preseason games, but what's going to happen when we get into the regular season? Keep in mind a guy, Jacoby Myers. We're going to be talking about him really soon. I don't want to get into that too much because we're going to have another episode coming up where we're going to get a little bit further into Jacoby Myers, but he showed out in week 1. N'Keal Harry, let's see what happens with him. But this was refreshing for owners who have already invested in him. But my belief is rookie wide receivers, typically in redraft, unless you're getting a really good value, we're going to pass on them. Josh Allen from the Buffalo Bills, a very inconsistent first week. Again, my concerns with him, I know what he can do on the ground with his legs. He's got that to help him. However, the inconsistencies is something I'm very worried about. He could have some QB top 5 numbers one week, and he could be on the very end of the QB 30-ish numbers the next week just because of how inconsistent he could be with his accuracy. They're going to continue to work with him. He's going to continue to get better. But again, the consistency with his throws, how quickly can they get him to a point where he's a consistent helper every single week, especially for fantasy owners who have invested in him, hoping that he can offer a lot of upside. Be careful with him to start the season. I know the upside is there on certain weeks, but it might not be even close on other weeks. David Montgomery, man, he's going to be really good. Again, if you've stuck around all offseason and you've been watching the Fantasy Headliners and you watched our draft coverage, I talked a lot about David Montgomery this offseason. He is a hard guy to bring down. It is very difficult to tackle this guy. For you Cohen truthers out there, I'm sorry. I think you're going to see a regression from him this year, and by the end of the season, David Montgomery is going to be a guy, I wouldn't say he's the lead back, but Cohen's going to be regulated to pass catching duties and maybe some touches here or there on the ground. But David Montgomery looks like he is the guy that's going to come in and take that job away from Cohen as much as possible. I love this guy. He fits that team perfectly. A really good defense. If they can get him going in the running game, this is a guy that is going to get the amount of volume that he needs on the ground and through the air to be a consistent running back 2 all season long for you. The Browns, they kicked off the season going 80 yards in 2 minutes. Man, did they look good. And we've been touting the Browns all offseason here on the channel. It's hard not to get excited. Again, it's the preseason, and they weren't playing a defense that is all that great. I understand, 100%. However, there's been doubters out there that are saying that Browns offense is not going to be any good. It's going to be a dumpster fire. They really came out and showed out that very first drive. I love the up-tempo pace of this offense. That's why they're going to be super successful. If they can do what they did on that first drive, the up-tempo, getting to the line, keeping things fresh, moving the ball around. And with Nick Chubb looked good on the ground and through the air. He got a couple of receptions in the passing game. He was able to turn those into some decent plays, some decent positive yardage. If he continues to do this, Nick Chubb is a guy that is going to be a lock and loaded running back 1 up until Kareem Hunt comes back. And I've continued to say it. Invest in him as much as possible, because at worst, when Hunt comes back, Chubb will be a reliable running back 2 at worst. Hunt's not taking the job from him, especially if he continues to look the way that he looked in week 1 of the preseason. Baker Mayfield looked good. I can't wait to see them get that full starting lineup on the field with Odell Beckham Jr. as well. This is going to be a really tough offense to start, especially if they run that up-tempo, hurry-up, quick plays, big play offense that we saw in week 1. The Kiki QT injury is a lot better than what we had originally expected. I've seen some people say that it's not going to be that serious. He could be back pretty soon. I've seen some other people say that this is a high ankle sprain that could potentially take him out into the start of the regular season. Keep an eye on that if you haven't drafted yet. More than likely, his ADP is going to continue to fall a little bit. If that happens, you can still get him at a really good price later on in the draft season. I would be willing to spend a later round pick on him, still hoping that he gets healthy. But for the Duke Johnson trade, we've already talked about it. We put out a video the other day giving our thought on the Duke Johnson trade. If you don't have Kiki QT playing out of the slot, that is huge news for Duke Johnson. I've already told you this is a guy that could be a running back 2 this season. Go check out that video if you haven't done it yet. A Duke Johnson breakout just a few videos ago. When this video gets done, go check it out, and I'm going to give you a breakdown on why I think he is going to be a reliable fantasy asset this season. We need to be careful with Aaron Jones. I liked Aaron Jones coming into this season. I'm one of those guys who thinks that he's a dynamic playmaker. He can make a lot of plays out of the backfield, but Dexter Williams is coming for him. Aaron Jones needs to get back on the field. I'm glad to see that they're not rushing him back, that they're giving him time. He needs to get healthy. We don't want to see a situation like where Damian Williams right now in Kansas City, he's got the hamstring injury. Is he rushing it a little bit to get back because of all the news of this being a running back by committee? We'll talk about that in just a second. Possibly. I don't want that to happen with Aaron Jones. If Aaron Jones is healthy, this is his backfield. He is going to be a legit running back too this year. But Dexter Williams, he's really trying to make a name for himself and get himself up that depth chart. So keep an eye on that. Be careful on draft day. Don't overdraft Aaron Jones. If he continues to be injured over the next couple of weeks, you're probably going to get a pretty good ADP value on him. If he continues to drop, then take your shot, but don't let him go any higher than really probably that early fourth round, late third round at best. So keep an eye on that. Mentioned it a second ago, the running back by committee in Kansas City. What do we think about it? Well, we've been telling you all offseason long, we don't like Damian Williams this year. Yeah, he has the upside, but he doesn't have a track record. He's been unable to beat out many guys in Miami for that starting job. So why is he all of a sudden going to be a fantasy asset this year? I get it. The situation looks great. But his numbers last year, his fantasy points, were basically propped up by an unrealistic amount of touchdowns that he is not going to be able to keep up this season, even if he were to be playing full-time as a starter. But now Andy Reid has come out and said, hey, this could end up being a running back by committee. I think that's what we're most comfortable with. Carlos Hyde is going to start getting in there more and more often. You're going to see a lot of different guys in that backfield get work. Be careful with them. Damian Williams is no longer a second round pick. I could understand the argument for making him a second round pick, even though I didn't agree with it. But at best now, maybe late third, and even then, that's a little too spicy for me. Personally, I'm going to be skipping on Damian Williams altogether and let someone else deal with that potential headache later in the season. The backfield in Los Angeles for the Chargers. What's going to happen there? Justin Jackson, he ran hard this weekend. He looked good, averaged just over 4 yards per carry, was able to bury into the end zone for a nice touchdown. Austin Eckler got a goal line carry and fumbled it on the goal line. He can't do that too many times. It's week 1 of the preseason. Probably not going to hurt him too much. But Justin Jackson looks like a guy that could offer you value in later rounds, especially for people who decide I'm still going to invest on Melvin Gordon. If you get Melvin Gordon, then you got to get Justin Jackson or Austin Eckler to go with it. And honestly, I've said this about Austin Eckler a lot. I think he's a good running back. I think he's a good supplemental running back. He's good when he helps out another guy. So Justin Jackson and Austin Eckler, I expect them to be a huge time split this year. Do not overdraft them. Do not overdraft Austin Eckler, hoping that he gives you anywhere near what Melvin Gordon has been able to give you in the past. A flex play at best for both of those guys in good matchups. That's what I'm going to be going with for the time being. Dwayne Haskins did not look great. But it's hard to look great when your team isn't that great around you. The offensive line there is awful. Dwayne Haskins did not look good. Case Keenum didn't even really look that good. Keenum right now, I still anticipate him being the starter moving forward. Haskins, unfortunately, didn't do anything to help himself. Daniel Jones had a good first week. Kyler Murray had a good first week. Dwayne Haskins, unfortunately, did not continue to monitor that situation for you Superflex and 2 QB league owners. Last thing to talk about, the Cowboys, Tony Pollard. He continues to impress in training camp. He's a guy that is getting a lot of looks in the offense, a lot of looks in the passing game. This offense feels that they can get very creative with him. The longer that Ezekiel Elliott holds out, the more Tony Pollard is going to get an opportunity to play. I'm going to say it again. I still fully believe that when week 1 gets here, Zeke is going to be in uniform. Because he's either gonna cave and come back, or he's going to get that contract. One of those two things I believe will happen. I think Zeke will be here week 1. He will be playing. However, in the passing game, I thought Zeke was in for a huge year in the passing game. However, Tony Pollard, if he continues to perform like this, he will cut into some of those looks. So he might start to drop a little bit in our rankings. We'll have to wait and see as we get closer. Zeke Elliott is still a top 6 pick for me. If you get past those first 3 running backs, and then you say, or first 4 running backs, if you include David Johnson, you say, you know what? I'm going to stay away from Zeke. I'd rather go with a few of these wide receivers. I'm okay with that. I get that. I understand that. I still like Zeke. I still think he can be the running back one this season, but we'll have to see. The longer he holds out, his upside will continue to come down a little bit, but we'll see. We got to continue to monitor that situation. There you have it, folks. Flew through a bunch of information for you really, really, really quick. However, those are the news and the notes. Our fantasy, basically, recap of what has happened so far in training camp. Don't forget, hit that like button. More importantly, hit that subscribe button. Become a part of Headliner Nation today. If you do, let me know in the comments below because I want to personally welcome you. Don't forget your Fantasy Headliners Draft Guide, $19.99 right now. Buy one before August 15th. You're going to have a shot at a signed Alvin Kamara jersey. And as always, feel free to hit us up with any questions here on YouTube in the comments, on Twitter as well. Doesn't matter. We'll get back to you as quickly as possible. One of the most interactive communities that you're going to find here on YouTube. Thanks so much for everything, Headliner Nation. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I'll catch you on the next episode. Have a good one.